Today I'm going to tell you a story about how I tried out various local Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu gyms and a martial arts gym teaching Muay Thai and a few other martial arts, and what I learned from the experience, why I did it, and what I recommend. So first off, why did I do this? Why did I go out and do a bunch of free trials and Groupons or pay for the first week or month of various facilities? I've done this with Krav Maga, I've done this with Jiu-Jitsu. Well, I think one of the main reasons was at first, for most of my life, I wasn't super interested in learning martial arts myself, but I always loved watching fighting through anime, movies, TV shows, and stuff like that. And so it wasn't really until I heard that in terms of personal development and growth, a man can really gain a lot more confidence and a lot more peace and presence and security when they learn some martial arts that I thought, maybe it has some utility that I can benefit from as well. And so that was the impetus of my start. Plus, I thought it might be fun. I mean, it looks really badass and cool and applicable. And so I did some initial research to find out the most applicable forms of martial arts that you can actually apply to the real world, which will actually help defend yourself. And ultimately, I heard that Jiu-Jitsu and Muay Thai were some of the most beneficial. And then there are some others that could be useful as well, like boxing. And I ended up also trying a little bit of a boxing trial journey quest as well. I heard that Taekwondo wasn't as applicable, but since then I've heard some controversy around that. Some people say Taekwondo is actually pretty useful in real life and mixed martial arts as well. Anyhow, what I did was I bought a Groupon that was for 10 classes to a location that was actually a far drive away, around 30 to 40 minutes away. And to make matters worse, I was already doing CrossFit classes, which are already pretty intense, 4 or 5 days a week. For most people, that's pretty insane. And I decided at the time not to stop doing CrossFit. I told myself after my CrossFit class on Tuesdays and Thursdays, I would drive down and do the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu classes. Now, this was a lot, and if I were to go back, I wouldn't do it again. I guess part of it was I thought it was badass that I was doing double duty, but here's the thing. No one knew I was doing it. I didn't tell anyone, so no one was really cheering me on about it. So what was the point? If anything, I think it was putting potentially too much stress on my body, which could lead to injury or just mental burnout. Even though at the time I had adjusted to that frequency of CrossFit, and it wasn't a big deal, it did start to get taxing on me to do both. So when I went on Tuesdays and Thursdays to this class, I also joined the open mat. Now, this was a session that was mostly for the more advanced belts, brown, purple, and so forth, and it was taught by a black belt. But oftentimes, due to timing and scheduling, that was a class I could take then. And sometimes I just wanted to do a double doozy of that and then the open mat as well. Anyhow, I went there, and I think there was a lot of fun, a lot of mind-blowing experiences, and a lot of things that I didn't like that I think, okay, that's important and I'll know for the future. So first and foremost, one thing that I really liked was that this was a place that I could learn much faster than other martial arts studios I attended later on. See, because later on, I also did a free trial with a very small studio that had maybe 3 or 4 students. The issue there was a lot of the students were very beginners, so they weren't even really good or understood how to wrestle and do that stuff. So when there was that open practice, it was very slow paced and almost you could tell the speed of learning was slower because they didn't even know what they were doing, and it wasn't as aggressive. Unfortunately, the mistake though, it was joining the open mats rather than just the beginner classes. While there were a few people there that were super friendly and knew that I was brand new and welcoming, there was a couple people there who were just maybe they were just so experienced, or because they were so young, they had a more of an aggressive attitude. And so one of them, definitely a kid, like teenager, he would just like destroy me. Like he was not holding back. He would like squeeze the air out of me and just laugh, and he say like, man, you don't know what you're doing, and then do it again. That's basically how an open mat goes. You just go at them, and then you do the grappling, and you basically try and take out the other person. I barely knew what I was doing. I was picking up faster than normal because like, I could observe, and we're going so fast and aggressively, but it was just too much for me. They were handling me too rough for my first experience. And so that guy was a bit of a jerk, but fortunately, a more senior friendly guy saw that and said, hey, come on over. And then I started working with him for the rest of that specific session I had in mind. So if I had gone to the beginner classes and just those, it would have been maybe a better experience, because the classes were much larger, and they had like maybe 20, 30 people in attendance per class. And the instructors were maybe a couple belts above, so they knew what they were doing, but they were more gentle and experienced. Another tip that I would give you is to really voice your flexibility if you're very inflexible. I didn't voice that, and when one of the instructors came over to kind of help me on my arm bar, before I could even react, he lifted my leg in a way, or pulled it out in a way that almost stretched my hamstrings far beyond what they were capable of. And it just so happened to be enough, but I was like, whoa, in my head. And I guess he didn't know, he assumed that everyone was of equal flexibility. And so that's a big thing. So that was my jiu-jitsu experience. I definitely recommend some of these more bigger gyms with established belts, because as you can see, the rapid rate of learning was faster. I also tried out a Muay Thai class for a week, and a couple other Brazilian jiu-jitsu classes. And I think, there's definitely, as a beginner, you don't need the perfect gym. I tried another one that had like a medium-sized class, and that one worked more or less just as well. Sure, the people there were clearly not as developed and skilled, and it wasn't as big as that first one I tried, but for a beginner, you don't need some world-class expert. You just need to learn the foundations. I think that's a big issue that a lot of beginners fail to realize. So that was fun as well, and you learn a lot, and it's really cool. I did, even though I may have only attended less than 20 classes in my life, I had developed a certain level of confidence, because I started getting a sense of like what I needed to do in these situations. I knew how to kind of minimize my body space, or how certain things won't work. I remember I was grappling with like a guy who was like 3 belts higher than white, and I saw him do this thing where he just laid on his back with his legs in the air in that guard position. So like it was impenetrable, right? Like he didn't have to be upright. So I tried the same thing on him, and then he basically exposed its weakness. He started running around me, and I couldn't spin around fast enough to keep up, because you really need the feet like attacking the person. They can't come behind you. So then what about Muay Thai and boxing and Krav Maga? Well, with Krav Maga, I took a few sessions. Like I said, if you're someone who's on a budget like me, there are ways of getting free trials, free weeks, or free classes. You can just go to their website and they'll offer that, but sometimes places like Lululemon have these like free class Sundays where like a random instructor, maybe it's a CrossFit instructor, maybe it's a yoga instructor, will come in and teach for free. And so I got my exposure various ways like that, and I've also paid it for drop-in classes because I just wanted to experience that. And I think in general it's a very cool art style. I took it from I think three different studios, and they all had a very strong, applicable kind of style. It was very much seriously grounded in real world combat. One to the point, and it almost scared me. He was like, "Oh yeah, in in a future class, we're going to be playing with electrified fake knives, so that when you feel the sting of that shocking you, you won't be phased. Just like if you get cut by a knife, you won't get phased. And I was like, whoa, I don't know if I want to do that. I don't know if that level of realness is necessary. Maybe it is, but like it almost seemed like they were really, really training for real world situations. Now, not all Krav Maga classes are like this, but I like the real world application. Maybe just not to that extent. Another tip that I would recommend if you were to go to these things is just be mentally prepared. I know, like, obviously, I'm a man, but I could definitely see that for me, I'm definitely more of a little bit more passive and cautious, and so for me, I'm already pretty caught off guard in some of these situations, because let's be fair, like some of these classes will go really, really aggressive with a first timer, and that can just really shock them out of not wanting to attend. So either choose you can't really feel it out, but just be prepared. But see if there's a class that's maybe or studio that's maybe not super aggressive to the newer people, because I experienced it with the jiu-jitsu place and I experienced it with the Krav Maga place, but that was just one out of each. Like the other studios were fine. And so basically what happened was they have this is a very common exercise in Krav Maga. They have this like cushion, and you hold it with two handles behind you, and then you kind of tilt it so there's a little space between your chest. And this allows for a little bit of a cushion when they punch. But man, do they punch super hard and super aggressive. The issue with that is, man, you don't even see it coming. Some of those hits, I was like, whoa, like I literally felt it, and I didn't feel good, like, because they were doing this rapid like punching thing and screaming, and the guy who was doing it, like he was just like super into it. He knew what he was doing. He'd been doing it for a while, and he was hitting me so hard that I was like pushed back a few times. I was trying to hold myself. And then when I held myself, I felt it in my chest despite the cushion. And it's a pretty thick cushion too. And so I think I should have spoken up more. I should have just been like, hey, like, I know this is normal for you, but just letting you know, like, this is almost shocking to me. Like, you're really going hard onto my body here. I know, like, this is like typical Krav Maga punching training, but like, let's just take it easy for day one. So that was just something that I found very interesting. And of course, that didn't dissuade me completely from returning to this. Why didn't I continue training? It was simply because CrossFit had been my focus and my strength and conditioning routine for many years. And I realized that everyone I saw chose one. They didn't try and double it up and do like Krav Maga and then CrossFit after. It was too intense. They chose that martial art as their strength and conditioning. And so I thought about it, and I felt that for my goals, a weightlifting program would be more impactful. And so it was a bit of a bummer, because I would have loved to do both, but it's too mentally draining to do them at the same time, and physically draining as well. So just keep that in mind. Like most people, like I've done other stuff too, hip hop class. I've even done stunt training, and most people in those memberships, they're just doing that. They're not trying to juggle a bunch of different things like I am. And so I realized that, and I realized I should not put too much on my plate. I would love to revisit that one day when maybe strength and conditioning isn't as much a priority, which can definitely happen. And that would be really, really fun as well. I think jiu-jitsu would be fun, and Muay Thai would be really fun as well. Krav as well. I mean, they're all really fun. Boxing, of course. At first, I didn't really know much about it, but it seemed really fun. You got the hands, and you're just doing these punches, and it's super fun. And you get to punch with these massive gloves, and it's awesome. And I actually paid for a few boxing classes and took a few free trials. One that I actually drove quite a bit for. That's the price you pay if you want to do a free trial at different locations. But I think with boxing, at the time, I didn't have as much interest in it because I was like, I need something more applicable. Like boxing is more of just an entertainment thing, right? But, as I've kind of grown and, watched more of boxing, saw Conor McGregor versus Mayweather, started to get more into boxing and learn about Mayweather and Pacquiao and all these people and get into that world as well off YouTube, I realized, hey, boxing has some really applicable abilities with your stance, with how you move, with how you hold your hands, and how that translates to MMA. And so I just started to see it more fun. Now with boxing especially, there's definitely more kind of fun variants of it. Let's just be honest. Like I went to one class with where it was more kind of fun, like not dance boxing, but like towards that realm. Like you're boxing, but in a rhythm or sequence for cardio. And so I found that interesting. The class just said boxing class, but you could tell it was more so for people who are like trying to have fun and lose weight as well. Sure, I'm sure you gain some fundamentals because they would like teach you the hooks and the jabs and the all those things, but and they would correct your form, but it was a kind of fun class. I think that's something good to do for fun every once per month. Maybe for you it's every day, but if I were to return to boxing, which I might one day, then I'm thinking maybe more of the more practical boxing would be good. And I actually did take a few classes around the more practical boxing before, and that was much harder than I thought. There was a lot of sequences with the hands and then movement with the feet that was complex. And I realized I am not adept and gifted with that coordination. I often moved around very awkwardly, just like I did in my dance classes, and the instructor maybe chuckled a bit. So nonetheless though, you get better with practice, and that's really how you kind of move on and improve. So that was that. Boxing, of course, definitely its own thing, and it's something I would definitely consider trying in the future. And then of course Muay Thai, another great one. Muay Thai is the probably the biggest memory of one where I had friends there, friendly people there who were super supportive and wanted me to return to classes. I took a couple Muay Thai classes at this place, and you wonder if they're really experts at Muay Thai because it didn't seem like they had belts, and they just kind of went off into their own world and kind of did their own thing. And they knew the movements, they knew like the punches and kicks and how important elbows are. And it got so fun that like I attended this basically like personal development event, and they had us do board breaks, and I did it with my elbow. But the issue is with that type of thing, I didn't know if like I could really progress like you could with a jiu-jitsu place, because those had belts, and just didn't seem like, even though the studio I went to was very fancy and polished and clean, it definitely was more of a chain studio. So it made me wonder, like, are these people really experts at Muay Thai, or they're just like kind of learning it and teaching it at the same time, and there's no like level up? I mean, I'd be much more confident if I had to fly to Thailand and take a Muay Thai class there, which maybe I might do one day. But nonetheless, a couple of the people there were some of the friendliest people there. They were really supportive. They remembered my name. They were like, "Hey, Will, thanks for coming. Like, yeah, you're really awesome. Like, great job." They're so supportive, and they lifted me up. And sometimes that's what matters more. Like I said, you don't necessarily need to find some world-class expert or even county level expert champion to really learn the basics and start progressing. At least for your first few years, you're just trying to learn the basics, and that teacher is enough for now. And so as far as making friends, that was another potential benefit from taking these classes, that I realized, wow, this is something that could be very good. The issue though was with a lot of these things, like that Muay Thai class, they're not cheap. They range in price just like my CrossFit class. around $200 a month, sometimes more, 300. And that's crazy considering that many people will opt in for a $20 or $30 gym membership at a Gold's Gym or LA Fitness or something similar like a Planet Fitness for $10 a month. So then why would you pay all this extra for this? Are you really getting that benefit? Plus, when you go into these places, except for maybe one studio I went to, there's no weightlifting equipment there. It's just an open mat space. So really, what are you paying for? You're paying for like the martial arts. And will you ever really use it? I mean, I could see some of these people going years, maybe their whole life, without ever having to really prompt themselves to use it. So maybe they're really there for the spiritual growth, the physical growth of that skill set, the enjoyment of it, and maybe they get some aerobic conditioning too. But I gotta tell you, although they had some strong aerobic drills to warm up and start with the initial, the very first jiu-jitsu place I went to, that was definitely the most hardcore during the open mats. Compared to the CrossFit training, like it's still night and day. Like CrossFit goes much harder than that. You're just going to be breathing so hard, and you can't get enough air into you. So, in terms of like the strength training, even like you're not lifting weights, so you're not really building like massive muscles or strong muscles. And so it's more about like movement and geometry of the body that you're learning with a lot of these things. So, when I weighed that all out, I figured for now, I'm just going to stick with the CrossFit thing. But definitely in the future, you never know. Like when I get older and I don't necessarily care about getting as much muscle as possible or looking that great, and just, looking, maintaining, then I can totally see myself transitioning to something like this. Because not only will it be more fun, but it'll be more amazing. And that also questions the business model these days. Nowadays, you can get these free boxing classes on YouTube, whether that's a dance boxing class or a legitimate boxing training class. And you can do it your own with, gloves that you buy yourself. So then what are you really paying for? And these businesses are trying to package something together to sell to you, and some people fall for that or think it's worth it. For me, right as of now, I'll stick with the YouTube videos. But I think, once again, making friends is another potential benefit that I wasn't expecting, but obviously welcomed. But when I look at the price for that studio, and you never know which studio is going to be the one where you're going to meet those people who are more friendly and awesome. And that can happen anywhere. It's happened in CrossFit classes. I tried out a couple CrossFit classes before I chose the gym that I wanted to go with. And same type of thing, some gyms were definitely very friendly and others maybe less. Maybe not because they were intentionally trying to be rude, but they just kind of felt that's just how the cards fell. And so I think that's a very great benefit, because especially if you're, new to an area or something, you need to make friends for your own mental health, your own happiness, for that camaraderie, and you don't want to be lonely all the time. So that's a fantastic way of establishing yourself and meeting awesome people. Now the con to that would be that, granted, it's just how the numbers stack. Almost all these places were like mostly guys, so that's just part of the thing. Like if you're gonna go to these things, you're going to be lucky to find like even one or two girls at some of these places. And that's really cool when I saw some of these girls who were really getting into jiu-jitsu, and some of them were getting up there in skill. So that was really cool that they didn't let that hold them back. But at the same time, probably more guys than girls, which not great for the bachelor, but something to keep in mind. So hopefully you found that story informative or entertaining. And I mean, I to a degree, I liked it all. Obviously, there's certain things I didn't like, and I have to adjust to in the future if I go to any of these. But overall, such a fantastic journey and experience, and such a legal and fair way of just trying things out without having to spend much money. I definitely encourage you, if you're not comfortable, don't just go to the first gym. try out 2 or 3. Buy a Groupon like I did and pay $40 for 10 classes. That's a great deal for your first month, and it can get you pretty far along and see if you like that place. And then if you do, like I did with the boxing classes and with certain jiu-jitsu classes, then you can continue to pay for more. And that's it. You know, I love trying new things, and that's my story. Subscribe, like, comment.